All right, so we are going to start another episode of Bootcast today. I'm your host Vivek Bhaskaran, and I'm also joined obviously with Romy Mahajan. And today we have Mike from Jelli. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey guys, really happy to be here. Thank you for
Awesome.
inviting me.
Good. Great background. So that's not your real office, but that's your fake office, I guess. So we'll start
My
there.
fake Zoom.
Exactly. So Mike, tell us a little bit about Jelli. Tell us your story. You were one of the founders. Tell us the story around Jelli.
So Jelly started about 12 years ago. It was a startup. Myself and my co-founder, Jatin Parekh, CTO, we thought that this very large and kind of old school industry, radio, which a lot of people had skipped over and sort of thought, oh, Pandora is already going to win. We thought it had already a significant audience and frankly was going to be around for a really long time, remaining very large. It still is. It hasn't actually eroded that much even in all those 12 years. And we thought we'd bring a cloud platform, so technology to this industry to sort of help it both from an audience perspective, but also if we could help it from an advertising perspective. And then over the years, developed that and became the largest audio ad platform in the country, creating marketplaces where people could buy and sell radio ads in a very similar way that you buy Facebook ads or Google ads. And
so like DoubleClick for radio, is that a simple way of describing this?
Correct. For most of our history, we were DoubleClick for radio. And then very recently, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, we were acquired by iHeartMedia, the largest radio group and audio company in the US. And we launched last year AdWords for radio. So basically, off of iHeartMedia.com, the ability to buy directly from iHeart using your credit card. It creates an audio ad for you if you don't have one. So it's a really easy way for people to get going. They don't have to call a salesperson. They don't have to know which radio station they want to get it on. They just pick their type of creative they're interested, like funny or whatever the tone is of the ad. We'll make one for them, and then they can have it run on radio stations. So it's almost like OpenTable or some easy way or DoorDash for radio. So
awesome.
But yeah, that's kind of what we've been up to and trying to make this medium act much more like digital.
So, Mike, you said something interesting about kind of radio's persistence, right? As a large, with a large audience and people still listen to radio. And I think for a while there was this whole FUD around radio's going to die, there were predictions that TV would die, etc. Isn't radio still like a $25 billion ad industry, terrestrial radio? Isn't it something just insane like that in the US?
It's huge. I mean, it's still roughly the same as it was. So it's about an $18-20 billion market in the US, 40 billion globally. Most of the business, about 60% of the business, are local businesses. So it's a significantly skewing local advertising medium. It's really great medium for people who are in their car, maybe looking to shop on the weekend, and an advertiser can reach them at that moment when they're maybe going to make a purchase decision, like I'm going to drive over to this retailer or drive over to that one to pick up the item. And so it's used by some national advertisers, like big chains and stuff, heavily. So there's some like Home Depot and various ads that we're all familiar with because we've been driving around ourselves and hearing them all the time. Like O'Reilly's Auto Parts, you can almost sing the jingle. But very effective medium for people who use it. And now it's starting to change. I mean, you are starting to see now, 12 years into Jelli, that you're starting to see podcasting like the one we're doing starting to really expand. People are listening to it in the car as well. Yeah. It's a great companion, like radio, for your drive. And so we are going to start seeing change, but it's still, the old AM FM radio is still a very big channel, even 2020 and 2020.
But Mike, do you think about radio or do you think about audio as a larger category, right? Or is it both?
We think about audio. Marketers, especially big national brands, agencies, et cetera, are thinking audio. Right. They're thinking about, they love podcasting. It's a new medium that's growing very fast. They love radio for scale, but the hot new areas such as podcasting, streaming, but also even voice platforms that are audio by nature are very exciting categories. And so audio is definitely like hot. That's the overall category. Radio is an anchor channel, I would say, for scale, distribution, effectiveness, But we look at it both, and iHeart, who we're part of now, is very strong in all of them. So iHeart's, I think, the largest podcasting company now, or any given month, it'll be one or number two behind NPR.
Right.
And so you look at it, it's sort of multi-channel strategy for iHeart around podcasting, streaming, and also radio as an anchor.
Got it. Mike, I have a question. A long time ago, you had educated me about something that was super interesting, at least for me. It was like you had talked about like active listening and passive listening, right? I mean, I think you guys have this nomenclature in the industry. Tell us about it. Like, I didn't know about it. Once you said that, it kind of made sense, but definitely that was a eye-opening kind of active versus passive models. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that when we started Jelli, we originally started with this idea that we could create social listening, the idea that people together synchronously, so at the same time, could both listen to the same thing and react to it. And we thought that would be that sort of interaction model would really change it. And we even gamified it, made it really fun to do that. And our saying back then was, we all have the same songs. I mean, we all bought these songs a long time ago. Your favorite song, you've listened to it a gazillion times, but they're, when you hear it on Pandora or on the radio or on Pandora, or when you hear it in a social environment, it just is a different feel.
Absolutely.
And we were kind of like the jukebox at the bar. If you've ever had that time where your song got on the jukebox and you're like, that's my song, and it's sort of, you've heard it a zillion times. Why are you so excited? But it just is cool that everyone else is hearing it too. So that synchronous idea was the first one, creating a synchronous social listening. And the second one was interaction, where you're leaning forward and having some impact on what you might hear next and other people might hear next, and chatting about it. So we had all these elements at Jelli initially. We learned a lot from it, including the fact that it is extremely addictive. It can be very addictive to have your song, listening to your song with other people doing it at the same time and talking about it. The chat room was something that was a huge part of that experience. Synchronous chat went along with the synchronous listening. It was also a double-edged sword, because we found that you had to moderate it. And you're seeing this now on Twitter, you're seeing this now. I mean, we never, thankfully, had to deal with the culture wars that are occurring right now in our country on chat. We just had to deal with some 14-year-old kid who was a little too, let's call it, excited about being in chat. But we had to send a banhammer in his direction or her direction.
It's funny, you should see Vivek going crazy about opera and country music. I mean, Mike, I've got a question, because I've known you, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for 12, 13 years, and you're a big company guy. You're at Microsoft, you're at tell me, you're at Harvard Business School, and then you started the entrepreneurial journey. For me, that's fascinating. Someone like Vivek has been an entrepreneur literally from day one almost, right? But you had gone through a different narrative. Walk us through that a bit. I mean, the Bootcast, people love to hear stuff like that.
I don't know if I would have been ready to start a company right out of the gates and out of college. It's more power to everyone who can do that. Even when I did start a company later on in life, I needed a partner. I needed a strong partner. So for me, it was also finding a good co-founder when I got to that point. But back in the starting, I really learned a lot. I was always about learning. So I figured, like, what do I need to know? What am I learning? What do I want to know? And I remember I had an infinite amount of learning that was occurring in these bigger companies in these different industries. In fact, I was on Wall Street for a while. I learned a lot while I was there. I would tell you that there was some point, though, where some friend of mine said, he was almost poking me a little bit. It's like, can you learn any more about business development, which is what I was doing at the time? He's like, dude, what's your problem? Kind of.
Right.
And I was sort of thinking, like, since that was so important to me, that concept of learning, I was like, oh, you're right. What's the next challenge? And that's when I started thinking, you know what? I think my next step is I am ready to try to start something. And so it didn't happen right away when that occurred, but I knew I was sort of prepared for it. And I did go into it with eyes open that it would be hard, and that I didn't know everything. I needed to find good partners around me to help us do it together. And I also was very thoughtful before I started about the industry that I wanted to go into, because I wanted to make sure that I de-risked it as much as possible. So I tried to find an area that I could pick up the phone and call people who were important in that industry to help us be successful. And I I use this idea of a bullseye. So I said, if I can pick up the phone and call somebody, they're in the center of the bullseye.
Right.
If they could help me within like a day or two, I could reach somebody. They're in the second concentric circle. And then the last one was like, maybe it takes a week or a month to get a hold of somebody.
Right.
Who's in those circles? I try to line up as many people as I knew in those different areas.
Brilliant.
And I said, okay, that's the area I'll go into, because like, we know how risky things are.
Yeah.
I'm like, if we can get some other people to help us, whether they're future customers, partners, investors, employees, partners, whatever, then we
that's a good way of mapping your kind of network, if you will, right? A network mapping of internal network. Like, okay, these guys can help me with this guy, and then you can say like, where is the highest concentration of outcomes that you can get? Of course, you went to Harvard, so you did all this math and did that.
But it's also interesting, right, Vivek? I mean, because you're mapping both their ability to help, but also their desire, right? So you're kind of putting a score on that as well. Will they answer my call? Maybe they can, but will they? And will they want to help, right? So
that's totally true. Like, actually, Romy, that was a really important one, which was, I felt that if I was to reach out, I needed to come up with an idea to help them first.
Great point.
Not sort of like cheesy quid pro quo-y kind of thing, but more just like, look, if I'm going to connect with this person, can I bring an idea to them or something I can do to really help them a lot?
Right.
Like a big thing, by pulling some other relationship or something else I can do for them. And once I did that a couple times, it actually worked. That one of our first big deal came out of the fact that it was that kind of thing. I brought some really big business that really had nothing to do with Jelli to our first partner, CBS Radio, and I was able to help them connect and close. I even helped pitch it at $8 million radio buy revenue.
Amazing.
And so they like almost gave me the deal, our deal, the Jelli deal, as sort of like, I just give it to him. We just got $8 million. So like,
So 12 years ago, a friend pokes you and says, dude, how much more are you going to learn about business development? Go be an entrepreneur. And at what point, 4 years in, 5 years in, did you just hate that guy? You're like, oh man, why did I listen? Before you started loving him again.
Totally.
Yeah.
Didn't take that long. Well, yeah, it's hard, man. It was the hardest job I've ever had.
Yeah.
It's the most stressful job.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny. I was talking to a guy who sold his company, and we had just sold Jelli. So we had just merged with iHeart. And so I was talking to this guy. We were just like sharing stories, and he had decided to start another one. Right. And he's like, I'm not doing this again. he started a new one. He goes, I forgot how hard it was from 0 to 1 million, like dollars. He goes, this is so hard. He goes, the only thing I'm ever going to do at this stage again is I'm going to probably buy or get, I'll try to get involved with a company that's got 5 million in revenue already.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll do. So it's sort of like they say that women, when they have babies, they have some chemical that makes them forget how brutal it was to go through the process of having a baby.
Yeah.
And men, we don't understand. We see it, but we don't really understand it. But there's some kind of chemical that makes them forget it. So they want to have another one. Yeah. And I think that entrepreneurs go through that same thing where you're kind of itching to do it because you remember all the positive and you remember all the highs and everything that you were able to accomplish. But the flip side is there were so many times that were hard, so many times that existentially difficult or stressful. And
so only on Bootcast, like we were comparing starting companies to having babies, right? So it's like
only on Bootcast, guys. You're right.
There you go.
That's three guys. Three
dudes. Good.
That's probably the wrong.
No.
It's. I think I agree with that. I mean, like, even I, in my experience, like I remember all the highs and probably don't remember the pain, misery, and suffering trying to get like one $5,000 deal closed, and it's just gonna probably like depressed
if
about
I'm not
it.
right, you've done 5 bootstrap companies that exceeded that ARR. So you've done it 5 times, right? So
with everybody else, right?
But what I'm saying, you as a founder.
Yeah. So 3, and 2 or twice have failed. So, and that's part of the thing, right? I mean, I think I love the highs and lows. I mean, I think another way I look at it is like, look, it's a high-low situation. So one day you're super excited, and it could be like literally the 3 days later, you're like, God damn it, this is shit's why this,
Yeah.
either software is not working or bugs, this, that, and customers pissed, and something is like, I feel like, feel like shooting yourself. But again, it's the highs and lows both ways, right? I mean, that's what, at least for me, that's what is exciting. That keeps me motivated. That keeps me kind of, waking up and trying to do newer things. Going back to you, Jelli, I mean, I think what was your kind of inflection point in terms of as you guys were, I mean, obviously you guys pivoted a couple of times. When did you feel that, things were like, yeah, dude, we got this thing? Was it a revenue metric? Was it traction metric? Was it anything else where you just felt, what was the metric that you guys thought about? Like, no, this is it, man. This is the right direction. We're heading in the right direction.
It was, yeah, you could tell when you started getting the big customer feedback, like when you got big customer deals, deployments, and they started coming in. And I remember there was one day we originally were working with iHeartMedia as a partner, as a customer, they were our customer. And I remember the day we got the call that said, hey, we're going to move forward. Let's start the process to do the technical, due diligence and things we need to do to be able to deploy and start working on the contract. And I vividly remember that day, getting that call. I was in a conference room. I walked in the conference room to further the private conversation. I had no idea what they were going to say. And when they say and the deal was big, it was a big deal. So that was a company maker. It was also sort of it solved a chicken and the egg problem where we also have agencies working with us on the other side of the equation buying. And so it gave us enough scale on the sell side to have the buy side feel like this is the place they needed to be as well. And so that deal was the chicken, I guess, or the egg, whichever the one that comes first. So
right.
That's a great story.
You talked a little bit about finding a co-founder. Like, how did you find Jatin? Jatin, your CTO. How did you find Jatin? Just tell us that story. How did you go about looking for a technical founder?
Yeah, a technical founder. Since I'm not an engineer myself, I knew that was something really important, right? Not only for building the platform and getting it off the ground, architecture, et cetera, but also recruiting. You're going to need to bring in great new people, and they're not, engineers are, that they will resonate with some of the things you can say from someone like my perspective, but they resonate more with somebody who's got a technical background. And so, also, I kind of thought from a supportive perspective, it would be good to have a co-founder, not just from a matching technical versus business, but having someone to bounce stuff off of. So when I was thinking about this, it's also a test too. I think it's a test for a startup. Can you pitch an idea? Can you start talking about an idea with someone who's willing to take as big a bet as you are?
Great. That's a good idea. That's a great kind of testing scenario as you think about like ideas. Like we've talked to a lot of people like, oh, everybody thinks their own idea is like, God's gift to mankind, but can you even get somebody else to quit their job or leave, take a risk and say like, look, it is good enough that I would quit and jump in with you. So that's also at least one anecdotal test to a particular kind of event. How did you find? Is there any story around how you found Jatin? Is it did you go on Craigslist and look for a technical co-founder? I'm just kidding.
Well, no, it was a good point. I was doing what you said, which is talking to people about ideas, testing the ideas with them to see if they'd want to help or join or whatever. Who knows? And along the way, someone said, "Hey, you should meet this guy." It was a friend of mine, and he said, you really should meet him because I trust him as much as I trust you.
Awesome.
And I was like, and yeah, so it was something like that. And I was like, whoa, you must trust me a lot. So, it was all of a sudden I was like, you trust me a lot, dude. I mean, I'm great. So you must be really great. So like fed into my ego. But I said, I definitely want to meet him because I knew that one of the biggest things that could kill a startup is having founder divorce or some sort of founder split, some problem there. And so that when you're having a founder, you're getting married. You truly are. And divorce is not going to work out very well for your startup. So so there had to be that good fit also. And I got lucky on all fronts. Jatin, not only strong background technically, could recruit. Also he was great with investors, but he was a great match with personality type.
Yeah.
I constantly continue to work on issues around, being too fiery or whatever. And he's got the opposite. He's like the most can absorb whatever is coming at him in the most calm way, which is such a skill. And so that match was really good as well. And so I think that, you know, when someone's looking for a co-founder, it's not like you can find all those things. I mean, it's like you kind of have to get lucky on a couple of them, but at least I went in knowing it was really important. I needed to be really careful, you know.
And it culminated in massive success, and one that continues to be successful, right? As you introduce new products. And
yes,
from what I know, I mean, you know, Vivek and I did some homework here. I mean, you know, the team is happy, very innovative, and so on. And it's not like you have a huge number of people. It's a small number of people doing you know, some amazing stuff, right? So
yeah.
So
yeah, it's actually, it was funny after, not funny, but I guess after, it makes sense, after the acquisition, iHeart even could use us even more than they were using us before, because they didn't have the same contract terms in place.
Right.
So we ended up having ×4 revenue on our platform, like in the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And so it was one of those things where when a VC that we used to have asked me about how's it going, and I told him that, he's like, oh man, why did we stop? Right. But I was like, look, it wouldn't have happened if that merger hadn't occurred. That revenue wouldn't have showed up like that.
Right. So it's kind of a product of the success as opposed to a frequency, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And tell us the story, and tell me a little bit about like when you decided to kind of pull the trigger with iHeart. And obviously you guys were running independently, and then like at some point, you know, they were your customer / partner, and then eventually they ended up obviously acquiring you realistically. So tell us that, you know, how did you go about making that decision?
Well, we were looking at the market, it was evolving, and we thought we had a pretty good position with the way our platform for advertising was working at that time. But you could see on the writing on the wall, it was coming with podcasting quickly. You could see that what was coming with voice, and, you know, these sort of new devices and connected cars even. And we realized that we're going to need to, we even had a project name for it called Big Sur. We're going to need to fund that. So we started thinking we need a big round to fund the effort to grow into these areas, these new areas. And in the process of doing that, iHeart, who's already a partner and an investor, said, you know, maybe this is the time for us to talk about connecting together, because we have all those things and we can scale faster if we're together. And I think that although we had some other folks looking at us, it was just so strategic for them, for iHeart, that it made a lot of sense.
Were there any conflict of interest there, since they were customers as well as kind of equity holders? Kind of how did you manage? You're kind of like in between. You know, you got an equity stake. Obviously, they're customers, and obviously they're also making an offer, and you have secondary offers. Tell us a little bit about like that process. Well, you know, how did you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the challenge of having a corporate or customer corporation as an investor as well. There's a natural conflict of interest, and they even sit on, in this case, they sat on our board, so they have access to information, and so that could even ward off other suitors if you have a process rolling with other people interested in it, because they feel like the other party's got an upper hand. You know, they don't have to buy as much of the company to start with, like they already have a chunk of the company, so they have to show up with less money to get the whole thing. And secondly, like they have the board seat. So how are you going to manage that? It feels like they'll have inside knowledge about how the process is going, evaluation or whatever. So there's a whole bunch of issues around having a corporate partner, also a suitor, when you're running a process with potentially competitors of them. So we had to be very careful, and we had a separate committee created that excluded them for fiduciary duty to the other investors. And we also had VCs involved who were very interested in the best outcome. So they naturally wanted to gravitate towards having that separate committee anyway that they would sort of drive. We also hired a banker, which not every company needs to do when they're selling, but in this case, because we had the corporate sort of parent, it was useful to have them in place to also keep everyone a little honest. And make it so that not every conversation had to go to Mike. You know, like calling me, if you're on the board, it's easy. Like no matter what I say, you can probably get some info out of me somehow. You know, even if I'm really good at bluffing or just not saying anything.
Yeah.
Like, whereas a banker, you know, if they contact that, it's going to be a different kind of conversation in which it's filtered differently. So that is a good reason to have a banker, an agent. to manage that kind of process if you've got a large corporate investor who's also a potential
That's a good
acquirer?
point. That's a good point. They kind of keep the kind of all the pieces in the right spots rather than kind of
Yeah.
like everything coming back to you. Otherwise, it would have come back to you, frankly.
Well, because if you think about it, like they're just asking for updates. How you doing? Like how many other acquirers? I can't tell you, but they can kind of start asking you, and then whereas if it's a banker, it's like, yeah, we got a process going. There's 4 others, and they don't like they don't know where you are. They just know that what the banker's telling you.
Yeah, totally.
And I just push them off and say, talk to the banker. You know.
Yeah. Or this.
So.
I know that we have this on Bootcast. We have this notion of we keep it short and readable and I wanted to say, Mike, a great amazing story, and to me what you guys have done is revolutionary in terms of revivifying radio, right? And revivifying the notion that radio is not a dinosaur; it's a very important part of the ecosystem. So I think it's amazing.
Thanks, Rami.
Yeah.
Love what you guys are doing with the podcast too. Now you're part of the audio family here.
Yes, we are on iHeartRadio too. So we're
Awesome.
gonna publish this up. Thank you so much, Mike.
We used to just scream at each other for audio, but now we actually do a podcast. So.
Exactly.
Okay. Mike, amazing, right. And say hello to the rest of the team.
I will. Thank you guys. Thanks
for
inviting me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.